I told them in the first service I didn't know I was getting walk-up music, but that's what that's basically it. Some of you folks don't know what walk-up music is, and that's okay. Ask somebody near you, and they'll tell you. Somebody younger, probably. So Keith is out today, as you can see. He's traveling with his family, so a well-deserved respite, and I pray for their safe travel, and I hope you spend time every day praying for our senior pastor. He's a good one, and we're fortunate that God's called him here to New Union. But he's out today, and so I'm privileged to be able to speak to the church on Father's Day. It is a special day to so many, and yet on some other level, it's a sad day for many people too. So we always want to be aware of that, and as we're spending time enjoying each other and enjoying our families, remembering those that have gone on before us and those who maybe didn't have a father that they were crazy about, or one that didn't do a very good job, frankly. And you've got an opportunity to overcome that, and so that's a challenge today, and we'll learn more about that. We're going to be in the book of Esther, which is an unusual selection actually for Father's Day, because there are characters and certainly men in the Old Testament who would be considered probably better fathers to represent, but I've chosen Mordecai today from the book of Esther. The book's not even named after him, but I chose Mordecai for a couple of reasons. One, I think Mordecai is great over these 10 chapters that we're going to look at very quickly. But secondarily, Mordecai is an imperfect human. He does a lot of things probably that are unsaid in the book that he shouldn't have done. He's a man with great fault, and like all of the men and women sitting in this room, he has a lot of sin in his life, and yet during some very large moments over these next 10 chapters, he makes an unbelievable recovery and saves the Jewish community in the story. So let's look quickly there at Esther 2, verses 5 through 11. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel or capital, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shemel, son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa the citadel in custody of Hegai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. We getting a little feedback there, Daniel? Thank you. And won his favor, and he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. I want to point out right out of the gate in that 5th verse of chapter 2 something I think that's very important. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai. That's really all we get about him. There's no great fanfare with this guy. We don't know much about Mordecai other than he was an exile in the Persian Empire. He was a Jewish exile who ends up being in Susa, the citadel. We don't know why he didn't return to Jerusalem 59 years prior, because ultimately King Ahasuerus allowed Jews to go back to Jerusalem. We don't know any of those things. All we know is that we get a very vanilla introduction. And I want to take you back 25 years. 25 years ago, the president of the company I work for, he came to me and he said, hey, we're going to put a bill before the legislature to protect farmers and rural landowners across the state because we think cities and municipalities are getting too heavy-handed with something known as eminent domain. And eminent domain is where these cities and municipalities can go out and they can take property for the public good. Whatever that means, the public good. That's up to determination. Now, they have to pay for the property, but sometimes it's a fair price and sometimes it's not. So we got very concerned about that fact because our population's growing, there's more people, and cities are getting larger, and rural communities are at risk, and we're losing all this farmland, and this was 25 years ago. And so he asked me to become the spokesperson for eminent domain and to travel the state speaking to any group that would allow me about this particular issue and why we needed a law in our state that would not stop eminent domain, but certainly slow it. And so from Mountain City to Memphis for 6 months, I talked to any group of people that would listen. From Rotary clubs to Chamber of Commerce's to Farm Bureau annual meetings, just all over the place, and had gotten pretty good at it and almost made myself an expert, because anytime you're more than 50 miles from home, you're an expert. And so in Jamestown, Tennessee, which is about 80 miles north of here, Crossville's about halfway between here and Jamestown, Fentress County, I was invited to speak to a meeting on a Saturday night at Alvin C. York Institute, which is the high school named after Alvin York, of course, in Jamestown. Some of you may have been there. So I show up, and there's a massive crowd of people. These are rural people, large landowners, and they're very concerned about their property. And so this man named Mr. Stockton was the moderator of the meeting. And I walked up to Mr. Stockton beforehand. I introduced myself. I said, now, did the home office send my bio to you so you could introduce me? And he said, oh, yeah, I got it. I got your bio. He said, when it comes time, I'll introduce you and you take it away. Okay. So they went through the meeting, and I was the kind of the keynote person. And we got to the end, and when it was my turn, we'd had a nice meal. We'd broken bread together. And imagine my surprise when Mr. Stockton got up. Now, Mr. Stockton was a country guy. He was about 85 years old, probably owned 2,000 acres in Fentress County. But imagine my surprise when he stepped to the podium and said, they've sent a boy up here from home office tonight to talk to us. Come on up here, Peanut, and tell us something. And I remember thinking at the time, is that it? Come on up here, Peanut, and tell us something. It's kind of how Mordecai enters this story in the book of Esther. There's no fanfare. He's just a guy, like most of the men sitting in this room, and yet we're going to soon see how, through God's divine sovereignty, Mordecai places Esther in a very good position that ultimately saves the entire Jewish community. We're going to look at these chapters very quickly, and this is difficult to do because there's 10 chapters in Esther, and I want us all to get a little piece of each chapter, but I'll miss something along the way, because over the next 5-7 minutes, I'll try to run through all those chapters. Promise me you'll go back and read the 10 chapters of Esther this week. It'll take you about 45 minutes if you're an average reader. If you're a good one, 30, and if you're slow, it'll take an hour, okay? Chapter 1, the queen's downfall. And I know many of you know this story, but not all of you do. Vashti is the queen to Ahasuerus, who is the king of the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire stretches from Greece to India, modern-day Greece, modern-day India, down to the Horn of Africa. It is massive. Ultimately, the Persian Empire becomes the Greek Empire, which then becomes the Roman Empire. But as you know, none of these empires last, including the one we're sitting in the middle of right now. But in chapter 1, we learn of this downfall. Ahasuerus throws this huge party for himself in the first chapter that lasts 187 days. Now that's a big party to say, look at me, world, I am unbelievably great. Meanwhile, Vashti, his queen, is having a party down the street with all the ladies. And so near the end of the party, after all of these gentlemen are inebriated and have lost good decision-making skills, Ahasuerus says, you know, what can I do to really put my stamp on this party and show these people how great I am? And his solution for that was to summon Queen Vashti, parade her in front of all the men because she was a beautiful lady. Not as pretty as Esther, but she was a pretty lady. She was the queen. So he summoned her, and Vashti said, no. No chance that that's going to happen. And so it infuriates the king. What's worse, all of his servants begin to think, hey, if the king's wife can talk to him that way, how can my wife talk to me? This is a problem. Chapter 2. Mordecai learns of this opportunity because Vashti is removed because she did not obey the king. And so all of Ahasuerus' servants decide we're going to go on a nationwide search or an empire-wide search, in this case, to find the new queen. So they summoned all the beautiful single ladies. It was kind of like speed dating in the Persian Empire. To come by, some of you don't know what speed dating is. I never speed dated, but I'm told it's a thing. And if you don't know what it is, Google it and you'll get some laughs probably out of it. I've not Googled it, but I'm sure you will. Anyway, as a result, Mordecai, he hears about this, and he has some lower position in Susa, the capital, for the king. We don't know what it was, but we know he hung out at the city gates a lot. But he hears about this, and he has adopted Esther, who is his cousin, but he adopts her. He hears about it, and he's like, you know what? Esther is an attractive young lady. I'm going to put her in the pageant. And he does. Hundreds of beautiful young women paraded in front of this king that you can read about. It's chronicled here very well. And ultimately, Esther is chosen in this lottery to be the queen. Well, Mordecai spends his days at the gates. He spends his days there. He hears a lot of stuff. And he overhears two eunuchs plotting to kill King Ahasuerus. And as a result, he gets word to Esther, who's the new queen, and says, Esther, I don't want credit for this, but I want you to go to the king and tell him there's a plot to kill him. Mordecai's a smart guy, because what he knows is the king's already in love with the queen, but this will take her from here to here in his mind, because he will then trust her completely. And she thwarts the plot to kill the king. Once they research it, they find out it's true, and they hang the two guys that are trying to kill the king. Mordecai surfaced it, but he didn't get the credit. Esther did, chapter 3. Haman plots against the Jews. Enter, stage left, the evil Haman. Haman is a character in this story who's up to no good. He is a ladder climber in the truest sense. And so Haman decides that he's going to work his way up the ladder, and it works. He becomes King Ahasuerus' number 2 guy, and what he discovers is that every day, once he's the number 2 guy, people bow before him as he walks down the street, because he's the king's number 2 guy. Save Mordecai. Mordecai refuses to do that. He refuses to bow before Haman. And so Haman becomes furious. His narcissistic self cannot come to grasp with the fact that somebody might not bow before him. And so he plots to kill all the Jews. He would really just like to kill Mordecai, but he thinks that's a bad look in the press. So I'm going to go to the king and get a royal edict, and I'm going to try to kill all of the Jews in the Persian Empire, which, as we mentioned, is a huge place. And so Haman is going about this plot, and Mordecai hears about it and goes back to Esther a broken man. He's in sackcloth and ashes, broken for his people because he thinks that he is responsible or is going to be responsible for the death of all his people because he would not stand or bow for Haman. Chapter 4. Esther is approached then by Mordecai. He sends word to her, hey, Esther, you're going to have to do something to try to save all of our people. Did I mention Esther has never told anyone at this point that she too is a Jew? At Mordecai's leading, she never revealed that. And so the king doesn't even know that his queen is a Jew, and neither does anybody else. And that's where in chapter 4:14 we find that famous verse, for such a time as this, that some of you have on your, probably hanging on your wall at home, because it's a famous verse. But Esther finds the courage to say, okay. And she puts herself at risk, personal risk, to try to talk the king out of this royal edict to kill all the Jews. Chapter 5. Haman plots, of course, to hang Mordecai. And his family encourages him in this, and as a result, he goes out and builds a gallows, which is something, kids, that you hang people on. We don't do that much anymore, thankfully, but we did back in the day, and certainly in the day of the Persian Empire. So he builds this gallows for the purpose of hanging Mordecai. In the meantime, turn to chapter 6, verse 1. This is what I would call a hinge verse in the story of Esther. A hinge verse. Chapter 6, verse 1. Are you there? On that night, the king could not sleep. That's it. On that night, the king could not sleep. So King Ahasuerus can't sleep this particular night. He knows about this royal edict to go out and kill all the Jews. But he summons one of his servants. He comes in with the book of Chronicles, which is basically the daily journal of the king. And he begins to read. And the king is listening. And he learns in those daily chronicles that Mordecai is the person who foiled the plot. He's the person who revealed to Esther that they were going to try to kill the king and thereby saving the king's life. And so Mordecai, in the eyes of the king, goes from here to here. All the while Haman is trying to kill him. Well, the story goes on and on and on. And I don't want to run out of time, but suffice it to say, ultimately, Mordecai is honored, Haman is hanged, and the Jews are saved. This is an ultimate twist plot. Now, I don't watch a lot of television, but here's what I would say to you. November and December, when I come in the home in the evening, we have these Hallmark movies playing. You're familiar with these? Now, Hallmark has gone woke, and so I'm about over them. But what's the lady's name? Has come up with a new, Candace Cameron Bure. Took me a minute. She's come up with a new channel, and they believe in the nuclear family. Hallmark, not sure anymore about the nuclear family. But Candace's channel's mom, dad, 2 kids, and a dog and a half, whatever. A good nuclear family. And so Rachel and I have switched the channel so that we're watching nice nuclear families. And where was I going with all that? Well, here's where I'm going with all that. The beautiful thing about watching these Hallmark movies is it always seems to come out the same. Like the plots are never any different, and they're unrealistically beautiful people in these movies. They're all bordering on perfection, and they all meet each other, and they're starstruck, and then they'll break up in a strange plot twist, and then at the end, what happens? They're back together. And you know, it's the cowboy rides away kind of thing. He kisses the beautiful woman, gets on his horse, and rides off into the sunset. And that's sort of how this story meanders. This has got everything in the story in Esther that you would want in one of these good Christmas time movies that looks almost unreal, until you realize that God's hand is in the entire story. And yet His name is never mentioned. It's one of only 2 books in the Bible where God's never mentioned. Esther, Song of Solomon. Those 2 books. And yet you can see God's thread running true throughout the entire story. Well, there's 5 things that I want us to glean from Mordecai. Because Mordecai really is an unsuspecting hero. Mordecai, it doesn't tell us much about it, but he's never struck me as an impressive guy necessarily. I think he was a little squirrely fella, probably. Most people back then were small. Generations are getting bigger. I remember seeing the Pope's body in the Vatican from the year 800 a few years ago, his corpse, and the Pope was about that long. I mean, he's still there. He's in a vacuum-sealed thingy, and he doesn't look like much, but he's a little guy. That's where I'm getting, because his body's 1,300 years old. But you can see it. I've been there. You can probably Google it and see his picture. But he's a little fellow. I think Mordecai was kind of like that. But here's what Mordecai was. First and foremost, he was compassionate. Mordecai was compassionate. It's evident that his heart beats for others. Let's back up to Esther 2, verse 11. 2, verse 11. The good thing about a short book is you can get to the scriptures quickly. 2, verse 11 says this, "And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her." Now, the story doesn't tell us this, but keep in mind, Mordecai adopts Esther. She's his blood, but she's not biologically his child. But he adopts her. It doesn't tell us about years 0 through 18 in this story. And for all of you that are parents in the room, 0 through 18 can be like a war. Snotty noses, dirty diapers. When they get middle school age, they walk into this genius vacuum and they walk out on the other side as geniuses. In high school, it's the hair, I never had a girl, but I'm sure hair's a big deal at their house. Hair's a big deal at my house, frankly. Clothes, what we look like, what we smell like, who's talking to who. It's a lot. And there's no guidebook outside of the one that matters for getting your kids from 0 to 18 without locking them up somewhere. So Mordecai made a huge sacrifice here to adopt Esther and raise her up. It's even more important that she's a girl. Like, I wouldn't have a clue what to do. I didn't know what to do with a boy. I sure wouldn't know what to do with a girl, because I was not one. And we're different people, right? But Mordecai was compassionate, and he was never far away. In Esther 2, verse 11, you see that he sat at the gates every day and asked about her. He wanted to know how she was doing. He also felt sorry for his people. Once he learned Haman wanted to kill all the Jews, he took that personally, because I would not bow down before Haman. I am going to be responsible for the slaughtering of the Jews. Number 2, Mordecai had wisdom and was street smart. He had wisdom and was street smart. Back up one verse to chapter 2, verse 10. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. So Mordecai, when he put her in the beauty pageant, he said, "Now look, Esther, I'm just telling you right now, do not tell them you're a Jew. Don't do it. Keep it quiet." Now, You could argue he hid something, he manipulated, he twisted it around. Again, Mordecai's not a perfect guy, but he was street smart. He wanted Esther to get the credit for revealing the eunuch's plot. We talked about that just a moment ago. His ability to read situations saved him, saved Esther, and saved the entire Jewish community throughout the Persian Empire. Number 3, Mordecai had courage. Mordecai never buckled. He was proud of his heritage. Turn to chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. Esther chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Mordecai had courage. Even at the risk of death, he was not about to bow down to the evil Haman. He didn't think Haman was worthy. He believed in being true for his beliefs. I picked on Danny Ruling in the first service. I'm going to pick on Colonel Harris in this one. Colonel is a fellow that I've known all my life. He's a guy that I've watched with great interest through the years, unknowingly to him. But Colonel is a man in this congregation who served a long time. I don't know how old Colonel is, but he's late 80s, maybe 90, I think. But Colonel is a man that I've watched exhibit courage in a lot of situations. Even in this congregation, he's one of the most long-standing members of this church, been a leader here for a long time, all the while leading his family well. He's been a pillar of our community for a long time, served in county government a long time, made a lot of tough decisions. Sometimes people liked him, sometimes they didn't. But he stood true to his belief. And so on Father's Day, I want to mention that about Colonel. I could go through this room and pick out a lot of fathers that I have tried to emulate in my life, and Colonel's one of them. Like Mordecai, he had courage. Number 4, Mordecai had hope. If you look at that verse in Esther 4:14, let's turn there quickly together. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. This is a place where Mordecai shows his hope, and he's challenging Esther to go to the king and get a stop put on this edict as it relates to killing the Jews. This is risky. But he was able to move her off the center because he had hope and he knew how to encourage her, and he could see the situation through God's perspective. 5, Mordecai's faith was rewarded. His words and his actions reflect a man who was not interested in position, but interested in standing up. God richly blessed him for it. Let's turn to chapter 10. We didn't even talk about chapter 10, but I want you to turn to chapter 10, verse 3. The last verse of the book says this: For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. This is a guy who was almost on the gallows 4 chapters ago. And today, the guy who was out to get him is dead, and Mordecai is now number 2. We're told he's respected not only by Jews, but by Gentiles. So in this story, we can see faith, loyalty, bravery, redemption, inspiration, and here are 3 takeaways. Number 1, God uses people wherever they are. He uses them wherever they are. These are unsuspecting characters. We've got an orphan who becomes a queen, and Mordecai, who I think was a pretty common guy, who had enough guts to do what was necessary to save his people. 2, be willing to lose the palace. We hear about that in the New Testament where the young ruler asks, how do I enter the gates of heaven? How do I enter the gates of heaven? And Jesus says, you sell everything you got and follow me. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. But we've got to be willing to lose the palace. Number 3, God's the real king in control. You know what's funny? If you think about a large door, I'm talking about a big old door. A large door swings on small hinges, doesn't it? It doesn't take a very big hinge to swing a big door. It takes a small hinge. Now, hinges come in different sizes, but so do doors. But relatively, a hinge is very small compared to a door. Most of our lives don't have these lightning bolt moments where we turn on a dime and become some completely different person. But most of our lives, when we look back on them, we can see these small hinge moments in our life that lead us to relationship with Jesus Christ. We can see His sovereignty all over our footsteps. If 90-year-old Colonel Harris could testify to this, he would say, there were so many events in my lifetime that were small at the time, and I maybe didn't even recognize them, but now that I'm 90 and I look back, I can see all of those hinge moments and how God was faithful to me because I was faithful to Him. So remember, Mordecai is the man of the moment. But this story of redemption in this book right here, this redemptive story of Mordecai and saving the Jews, it's like every other story in the Bible. It's just a precursor for the redemption that matters. It's a precursor for the redemption that matters. The only redemption that's going to matter is when Christ returns. And those who have followed Him will be swept up into heaven. And those that have not will not. I want to show you a picture and take just a moment of personal privilege. I know it's 1 minute after 12, but I want to show you a picture on the wall. This is my dining room at home. This is where Rachel and I live. This house is the house I grew up in because I've lost both of my parents over the years, and we ended up back at the home place. But this table, my dad and Uncle Joe cut some walnut trees off our farm in the early 80s. And we found a guy over in Etowah that built furniture. And I remember hauling this walnut over there to have that table built. It's not much, is it? It's just a table. It's rectangular. You can set about 6 or 8 people at it. If they're Swansons, you can set 15 there because they're a pretty cozy bunch. Some of you have heard me talk about the table, Matt. Others. I always think about the table on Father's Day because it's just a table. But in that top right corner, that's where I watch my father study his Bible. And he didn't do it every now and again. I watch him do it every day. There might have been a handful of days in my lifetime that I didn't see him read his Bible right there at night in the preparation for Sunday school. I'll tell you that story today as we close because I want you men especially to hear this. When your daddy's gone and you're gone, your children are not going to remember stuff you bought them. They might remember some of the time you spend with them. But if your children are believers, right there is what they'll remember. That's what they'll remember. On this day, that's what I remember. And so that would be my challenge to you, men especially, while we're running around trying to conquer the world with our careers or in all the things that we're doing. You make certain that your children see you honoring God with your life. Because if you don't, shame on you. Shame on you. Now, it's not going to be at this walnut table, But everybody's got a piece of furniture, you've got a corner in your house, you've got something. Make certain your children get to see you studying God's Word and honoring Jesus Christ with your life. Father, we're grateful today for the opportunity to come into your house, worship. Lord, thank you for this story, Lord, of Esther and Mordecai. I just thank you so much for his faithfulness to you, Lord, for his courage. And I just ask today now as we reach this time of response, if there's someone here, Lord, who does not know you, I pray, Father, this will be the day they would surrender their life to you. This altar at our church is a sacred place and it is always open, Father. And so I turn this time over to you now. In Jesus' name, amen.